مرحبا السلام عليكم. أنا اسمي جيف براون وأنا مدرس إسباني. بس دلوقتي أنا بتكلم العربي. ليه؟ زي أنا بتكلم العربي. من سنة بالظبط أنا ما كنتش أعرف العربي. أنا ما كنتش أعرف ولا كلمة بالعربي. ودلوقتي أنا بتكلم العربي كويس. مش كويس أوي، مش كويس جدا، مش مية مية أكيد. بس أنا مبسوط مع العربي بتاعتي. في الفيديو ده أنا هوريكم ازاي اتعلم اللغة اللي انتوا عايزينها. بس في الفيديو ده انا عايز ان انتوا بيشوفوا الطريقة مهمة ان اتعلم اللغة اللي انتوا عايزينها. انا مش ذكي قوي، انا مش اوكارينو، انا مش ساحر، انا شخص عادي زي انتوا جاهزين اتعلم اللغة اللي انتوا عايزينها؟ أنا جاهز. يلا بينا، يلا نتعلم اللغة الجديدة.
Yeah, people ask me that. I'm trying to learn another language. What is the most important sentence to learn first? It's not, where's the bathroom? It's not, I'm lost, help me. We have done extensive research on this. We have interviewed millions of people. And the winner easily is, my friend will pay. Dos cervezas, por favor, mi amigo va pagar. Mon ami va payer. Mein Freund wird bezahlen. Okay, that's today's joke. Let's go on.
My name is Jeff Brown, and I am a language lover. I love languages. I've decided to make this video because I'm going to show you, or I want to show you guys, how to learn or how to acquire the language of your choice, the language of your dreams in 1 year. During this video, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you step by step exactly what you need to do to acquire or to learn the language of your dreams. And check this out. During this year, during this video, I'm going to be acquiring a new language. I'm going to be learning a new language over the year, and I'm going to show you exactly step by step what I do to acquire that language. So during this video, I'm going to show you what you need to do, and I'm going to show you myself learning a new language. So I've decided to learn Arabic. I chose Arabic because Arabic, from what I understand, from what I hear, is an extremely difficult language. So let's talk about the name of this video for a sec. The name of this video is called How to Learn or Acquire Any Language in 1 Year Guaranteed. Now, that's actually not true. I'm not going to teach you how to learn anything. I'm going to teach you how to acquire a language. I'm going to show you how to acquire a language much like a baby acquires his or her first language. So let's take a minute and let's talk about the difference between learning versus acquisition.
Acquisition and learning, I get the credit for both of these terms, but I didn't really invent them. Acquisition and learning was kind of an informal use. Wallace Lambert of Canada used it. Acquisition means picking up a language, subconsciously absorbing the language, having a feel for it. Learning means what we did in school, knowing the rules, being able to consciously remember what they are, talk about them, etc. And the big breakthrough is that they're different, and that acquisition is much more powerful than learning, which came as a big shock to me because I love grammar.
So how do babies learn? Well, we know for a fact that babies don't learn language, they acquire language. Babies acquire language naturally, subconsciously, spontaneously, without even thinking about it. They acquire language through what's called comprehensible input.
So comprehensible input is the input that you get if you are a native speaker child growing up in any culture. The language that adults and caregivers use with you and other siblings and other children, all other humans, is comprehensible input. So that kind of input eventually creates acquisition. We acquire language from that kind of input. Learning is the sort of superimposition of conscious grammar, where we have a set of grammar rules, and so we consciously learn those. We haven't absorbed them like we did as a child, or if we learn a second language, we can also acquire it by simply living in the culture, interacting with people, and absorbing those rules. But learning is what's traditionally been done in classrooms, where there's not a lot of acquisition going on. Instead, what's happening is students are expected to memorize grammar rules and then somehow apply those when they speak.
In the reviews of the research I've looked at, the studies that claim grammar worked in their experiments, kids who had grammar did better. In every condition, every study, those conditions were met. They were students who liked grammar, who were advanced students who had studied lots of grammar. They were thinking about rules, they had studied the rules, and they had lots of time. So this is what the monitor does. If you're saying something in another language, the sentence pops into your mind. Then before you say it, if you're thinking about this, you can inspect the sentence, think of the rules you learned, and make corrections, but it's very hard to do. It's mostly used when we give people grammar tests. On grammar tests, you can focus on form, you can think about correctness, and you have time.
So, how do babies learn grammar? Well, we know for a fact that babies don't learn grammar. Babies acquire grammar. They acquire grammar naturally, again, through comprehensible input. Babies don't learn anything. So, when do we learn grammar? When do we as adults learn grammar? Well, we try to learn grammar when we're around 6 or 7. We have to go to school, and we usually take a language class or an English class or a grammar class. And in that class, what happens? The teacher usually says, okay, everybody, I want you to underline the verb once, underline the noun once, underline the verb twice, and the direct object 3 times. And that's when we first try to learn grammar. Now, I've got a secret. Don't tell anybody, but I never learned grammar ever. You remember those grammar classes, the grammar class I just told you about? I never paid attention. I didn't like it. So you know what I did? I drew. I daydreamed and I drew most of the time. In fact, all of the time. So my point is, I never learned grammar. In fact, studies show that we never learn grammar. The grammar we know comes from listening and reading to correct speech. So why study grammar? So for this year, as I acquire Arabic, remember, I'm not going to be learning Arabic. I'm going to be acquiring Arabic similar to the way a child acquires Arabic, acquires his or her first language. I'm not going to be studying any grammar. Now, there's a lot of you out there that love grammar. I know. I've met some of you. If you love grammar, that's fine. And you want to study grammar, that's fine. I suggest 2 things. Number 1, wait until you're fluent. Wait until you speak the language fluently or semi-fluently, then study the grammar. That's the way children do it. Or what you could do is just browse grammar. Maybe 1 minute a day, maybe 2 minutes a day. Just look at it and that's it. So if you study grammar, it actually hurts. There's a hypothesis called the monitor hypothesis. And what the monitor hypothesis says is this. If you study grammar, you study grammar, when you go to speak the language, you're going to think of the grammar first, and it's going to get in the way. It's going to hinder your natural production of the language. So once again, for this year, forget about grammar. Do not study grammar. If you want to do grammar, fine, browse grammar. 1 minute a day, 2 minutes a day, etc. 99% of your focus should be on comprehensible input. Those are things you hear or things you read, not on things you write and not on things you memorize.
So when I speak French, I don't generally worry about grammar, but there's a few things I like to show off. Like I make the past participle agree with the pronoun la chose que j'ai prise, and I can think about it and monitor it, and those little things there. But I've acquired a lot of French already, so it's easy to do. We're making students monitor everything, and they've acquired very little.
Okay, so let's talk about teaching methods. There are probably 100 different teaching methods out there. And is there a teaching method which comes closest to the way a child or a baby acquires his or her first language? And the answer is yes, there are two. The first one is called the natural approach. And the natural approach was invented in the 1970s by doctors Stephen Krashen and Tracy Terrell. Stephen Krashen is from USC and Tracy Terrell is from UCI, which is UC Irvine. So basically what happened in the 1970s is doctors Krashen and Terrell got together and they said, hey, let's see if we can design a teaching method for foreign language classrooms where the students acquire the language similar to most closest to the way a baby acquires his or her first language. So the natural approach was born. In a nutshell, basically in a natural approach classroom, this is what happens. Students don't get any grammar instruction. So there's no explicit grammar instruction at all. There's no verb conjugation, there's no fill in the blanks, there's no indirect object pronouns, preterite, subjunctive, etc. None of that. Students acquire grammar naturally, similar or exactly the way a baby acquires his or her first grammar. Secondly, there's no correction. So in a natural approach classroom, students are never corrected. And we'll talk about corrections later. And number three, in a natural approach classroom, the language is entirely done in the target language. So there's very little, if not any, English in the classroom. I would say at least 90% target language, 10% English only in emergencies, only when you really, really have to. The second teaching method is called TPRS. And TPRS is used mainly in high schools and elementary schools and middle schools. And I love TPRS. So TPRS stands for Teaching Proficiency Through Reading and Storytelling. Oh, I love TPRS. And so basically what TPRS does is, just the way it sounds, students acquire the language through storytelling. Storytelling, lots of stories, and then they augment that or they reinforce that with reading. So the class revolves around storytelling, and then after the story, there's reading to accompany the storytelling, or they read at home. So a lot of stories in the classroom, a lot of reading at home, etc. Okay, so how do we know the natural approach works? So during the 1970s, they did an experiment, and the experiment was done at UCI, or UC Irvine. And what they did is they did it using German courses. So what they did is they took 3 or 4 German courses, and they taught half of the courses using traditional methods. That's grammar translation, explicit grammar instruction, etc. And then they took the other German courses and they taught them using the natural approach. And then at the end of the semester or the end of the year, they tested the students, and the results were astounding. The natural approach students scored higher on almost every level. The natural approach students remembered more words, and they were able to speak for a longer period of time. Now, more recently, another test was done, and it was done by an instructor named Dr. Beniko Mason. Dr. Mason is a professor of English in Osaka, Japan. And what Dr. Mason does is she teaches using story listening. Now, story listening is a wonderful form of comprehensible input. So the natural approach, storytelling, story listening, they all go together hand in hand. So once again, Dr. Mason, she did this test. She taught half of her courses using traditional methods, and then she taught the other half of the courses using story listening or comprehensible input. And then she tested them after 5 weeks to see how many words they would remember. And again, the results were astounding. The traditional approach students remembered 36% of the words, and the story listening students, or the comprehensible input students, remembered 75% of the words. That's huge. That's 100% difference. So, over the years, many tests have been done. The natural approach versus traditional approach, TPR storytelling, story listening, etc., versus traditional methods. And the natural approach, storytelling, story listening, has beat the traditional methods in every case.
Mă numesc Alina Filipescu, predau limba spaniolă, clasa a 7-a și a 8-a la Kramer Middle School. De asemenea, predau limba română în ateliere de formare pentru profesori prin metoda TPRS promovată de profesorul Blaine Ray. Predau 90% în limba țintă.
大家好，我叫卢海云，我在 University School of Milwaukee 教中文，至少90%的时间我都在用目标语教学。
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Елена Ельмен, я преподаватель русского языка в Гроссман колледже, и 90% моего класса я преподаю на русском языке.
مرحبا، الأستاذ زياد من GSA Academy، وأنا أستخدم العربية في الصف حوالي 90% من الوقت.
You should have the illusion that the class is entirely in the target language. But using English here and there for help, etc., is perfectly fine. You do too much of it, you're not getting any comprehensible input. And you're going to wind up easily doing 90%, easily doing 95%. You probably wind up doing 98%.
If it's going to be 90%, it can't just be above the student's level. And you know, I used to give workshops and instructors would come up to me and they'd say, well, I tried speaking Spanish to my students, but they didn't understand me. And I'm like, well, yeah, your kid won't understand you either if you're talking about inflation to a 2-year-old. You know, you have to talk about their brand new shoes, you know, and the toy truck they're holding, or, you know, the cute bow they have in their hair. I mean, you have to bring it down to their levels. And it's a lot of work. It's way, way easier to just give them a bunch of grammar exercises. This is way more work.
It's easier to stop and explain a grammatical structure, but it doesn't help the student acquire the language. So it's an easier process, and if you fool yourself into believing that this easier process actually achieves the same results, you're going to try to do that process.
The State Department of the United States has come up with a list of languages and their corresponding difficulty levels. Now, this is a list for native English speakers, like me. I'm a native English speaker. So in level 1, you'll find the easiest languages for English speakers to acquire. And in level 1, you'll have Spanish, Italian, French, Portuguese, Romanian, Dutch, Swedish, and Afrikaans. Now, the reason these languages are so easy for English speakers is these languages have tons and tons of cognates. A cognate is a word that sounds exactly like or similar to the English equivalent. So Spanish has tons and tons of cognates. For example, bicicleta, motocicleta, carro, automóvil, gorilla, etc. So same thing with Portuguese, Romanian, French, Italian. They have tons and tons of English cognates. So according to the State Department of the United States, it should take you 575 to 600 hours to acquire one of these languages. And if you think about that, that's nothing. That's absolutely nothing. 575 to 600 hours. You can easily do that in 1 year. In fact, that comes out to 11 hours a week. 11 hours a week is nothing. That's absolutely nothing. Now, think about it. If you're taking a 5-unit, 5-hour language course at your college, university, high school, etc., that's only an extra 6 hours a week outside of class. That's less than an hour a day. That is so easy. Okay, level 2. So level 2 is German, and according to the State Department of the United States, it should take 750 hours to acquire German. And from what I hear, German is a little more difficult. The grammar, the German grammar is a little more difficult than, say, Romanian grammar or Portuguese grammar or Spanish grammar, etc. Okay, level 3. In level 3, you have 3 languages. You have Malaysian, Indonesian, and Swahili. Oh, how cool would it be to acquire Swahili? And according to the State Department of the United States, it should take you 900 hours to acquire one of these languages. And once again, that's nothing. 900 hours in 1 year is nothing. So over 1 year, 900 hours, that comes out to 17 hours a week. That's nothing. And once again, if you're taking a language course, a 5-hour, 5-unit language course, that should take you 12 hours a week outside of class. Okay, level 4. Now, level 4 are the majority of languages on earth. This is a huge list. This includes languages like Vietnamese, Thai, Tagalog, Hmong, Cambodian, etc. And according to the United States, the State Department of the United States, it should take you 1,100 hours to acquire one of these languages. And that's not bad. That comes out to 21 hours a week over a 1-year period. And once again, if you're taking a 5-hour language course outside of class, that's only going to take you 16 hours a week over a year to acquire one of these languages. That's a little over 2 hours a day. That's very little time. Okay, level 5, the most difficult languages on earth for an English speaker to acquire, according to the State Department of the United States. And those are 4 languages. Those are Japanese, Chinese, Korean, and Arabic. And according to the State Department of the United States, it should take you 2,200 hours to acquire one of these languages. So I've got sort of a secret, and I'm going to share the secret with you. This is what I'm going to be doing this year to acquire Arabic. I'm not going to be doing any reading or writing. I'm only going to focus on comprehensible input, listening, and speaking. Exactly what babies do. So, as you know, babies around the world don't read or write anything.
If I were teaching a language that did not use the Roman alphabet, I would not do any reading and writing for a really long time. I think it's so easy to do after you have a 5,000 word vocabulary. So once your vocabulary in Arabic hits 5,000 words, it won't be so hard to learn to read and write Arabic.
So one of the problems I see is a lot of students who are studying level 5 languages, for example, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Arabic, they spend a lot of hours reading and writing the language, specifically writing the language. I've seen tons of students memorize, writing, reading, memorization. They spend tons and tons of hours writing the language, memorizing characters, etc. And they spend very little time comprehensible input, listening to the language, reading the language, speaking the language. So that's a huge mistake that I see a lot of level 5 students doing. So if you're studying a level 5 language, I'm going to suggest forget about reading and writing until you're fluent in the language or semi-fluent in the language, just like a baby acquires his or her first language. You need a language parent, somebody who's going to help you acquire the language, somebody who speaks the language that you want to acquire and help you acquire that language. And the best place to find these people, number one place is family. There might be someone in your family who speaks the language that you want to acquire. Number 2 are friends. You might have a friend who speaks the language that you want to acquire. Chances are you do. And number 3, coworkers. Chances are you probably have a coworker or 2 or 3 who speak the language that you want to acquire. In fact, all of your coworkers might speak the language you want to acquire, which would be awesome. So those are the number 1 places to find people who could be or are going to be your language parents. Now, what if you can't find enough people to be your language parents through your family, your friends, your coworkers, etc.? Another great resource is trades. Now, what are trades? Trades are basically language exchanges. That means you're going to need to find people, or you're going to find people who speak the language that you want to acquire, and you're going to trade them for the language that you already speak. In most cases, if you live in the United States, it's probably going to be English. So if you speak English, you're going to trade with someone who wants to acquire English for whatever language you want to acquire. So these are language exchanges. And I've done this thousands of times. Language exchanges are awesome. Now, where are you going to find these people? There's 2 or 3 places to find these people. The best place to find people to exchange languages with, if you speak English, the best place is at an ESL classroom, an English as a second language classroom, at your school, your college, your university, or an English language center in your community. So another great place to find trades is Craigslist. And I just put an ad in Craigslist saying, I'm acquiring this language. Would you like to trade English or Spanish or one of my other languages for whatever language I'm acquiring? And it works awesome. I've done it for Chinese. I've done it for Italian. I've done it for, I think, French. So it works really, really well. It's a great resource. Another good resource are apps, and there's a couple apps out there, and they're called Tandem and HelloTalk. And these are apps which are designed for people who want to trade language. So I've used both these apps. They work really well. And basically you go into the app, you type in the language you speak, you type in the language you want to acquire, and boom, it gives you a list of people in your area who want to exchange with you. So what are you going to do once you sit down with your language parent, your language partner, your trade, etc.? So right now, I'm going to show you the magic. This is the most important part of the entire language acquisition program. So you need two things. Number one, you're going to need magazines. You need to get as many magazines as you can find. And number two, you need children's stories. Again, you need to get as many children's stories as you can find. So let me talk first about magazines. So it doesn't matter what language the magazines are in, and it doesn't matter what language the children's stories are in. The important thing is that the magazines have tons and tons of pictures. Now this magazine is Sunset Magazine. I love Sunset Magazine for language acquisition. And the reason I love Sunset Magazine is it has tons of great pictures. Sunset Magazine is a travel magazine, which means it's going to have pictures related to travel, food, clothing, accessories, ads, etc. This magazine probably has around 200 to 300 great words that I want to acquire. So when you sit down with your language friend, you're going to ask him or her to lovingly describe all of the pictures in the magazine. And while he or she's doing that, of course you're going to want to participate. And the way you participate is this. He or she's going to ask you simple yes or no questions about the pictures in the magazine. And then you are going to ask some super simple questions too. And the most simple questions are, what is this? What's that? What's he doing? What's she doing? And why? Why is the most important question in any language. So let me talk about children's stories and storytelling in general. Storytelling is the most powerful way to acquire any language. I cannot say enough good about storytelling for language acquisition. Now, storytelling, children's stories, this is going to be the bulk of your language acquisition program. I would say about 80 to 90% you're going to be working on children's stories. Now, just like magazines, and like I said, it doesn't matter what language the children's stories are in. The important thing about children's stories is that the pictures are very big and the text is very small. Now, your language partner, your language friend, he or she's not going to translate the story. In fact, I don't recommend he translate the story. He or she won't need to translate the story because the pictures are very big. It's very easy to follow. It's a children's story. So, just like magazines, he or she is going to lovingly retell you the story in the target language. And he or she's going to ask you simple yes or no questions. And then just like magazines, you're going to want to participate. So you're going to ask, what's this? What's that? What's he doing? What's she doing? And why? Now let me tell you something you don't have to do. You don't have to retell the story. In fact, you never have to retell the story. In fact, retelling the story is probably going to be extremely difficult. Remember, language acquisition is all about listening and not speaking. So when he or she's retelling the story, you're acquiring the language through listening and not speaking. So you do not need to retell the story ever. Children's stories, storytelling in general, are the way to go. So once you sit down with your language parent, your language partner, etc., you need to tell them that you have 3 or 4 very important rules. So rule number 1 is no English. You need to tell that person, you know what, during our language session, during the hour or 2 we're together, please don't speak any English at all. Now, if you don't understand and I don't understand, you have 2 or 3 options. My favorite option is just to gesture. You're going to act it out. You're going to try to get the person to understand what you're trying to say. And the way you do that is through gestures or acting. And that works a lot of times. That's my favorite thing to do. Number 2, if you don't understand and I don't understand, you're going to draw. I always bring pencil and papers to all of my language sessions, and I love to draw. Drawing is so important because remember, I want to stay away from English at all costs. I want to stay in the target language about 99% of the time. Now, if you want to do 5% English, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to do about 99% target language, and I'm only going to speak English about 1%, and that's just during emergencies. So, no English. You're going to gesture or you're going to draw. Now, if at any time you don't understand and I don't understand and we're stuck, we're going to use the term "it's not important." So we're going to say that in the target language. We're going to say, you know what? It's not important. Let's move on. Let's go to the next topic. Let's turn the page, etc. So in the target language, it's not important and we just move on. That's rule number 1, no English. Rule number 2 is no grammar. So I'm going to ask my friend, I'm going to say, you know what? During this 2 hours or hour or 30 minutes, whatever it is, please don't teach me any grammar. Don't say because it's a girl we say it this way, because it's a boy we say it this way. If there's a group of people we say it this way. No. Remember, I'm going to be acquiring grammar naturally, like a child acquires his or her first grammar. So once again, rule number 1, no English. Rule number 2, no grammar. And rule number 3, no corrections. So I'm going to ask my friend, and you're going to need to ask your friend, please don't correct me at any time. And the reason is correction does not work. It's basically a waste of time. TPR stands for total physical response. And you know what? That's just a fancy name for commands.
So TPR stands for total physical response, and it's learning a language through movement, acquiring a language through movement, it is really considered, and it is, experience shows and science shows that it's one of the most powerful teaching techniques that we can use in a classroom. It is, we use TPR every time we present language meaningfully with movement.
Every foreign language acquisition program should include lots of TPR or lots of commands. So let me tell you how it works. So basically what you're going to do is when you get with your language parent or your language partner, your trade, whatever you're with, ask that person to give you a list of commands or verbs or actions. So basically you're going to have your friend tell you just a list of commands. So eat, drink, jump, sleep, dance, sing, complain, talk, turn around, jump, run, anything like that. You want to get up to about 100, 200, 300. See if you can do up to 500 commands eventually. I like to do about 50, maybe 100 on one session. So you don't even need to leave your seat to do commands. I like to use my fingers. So what I do is I go like this. I go jump, walk, run, turn around, sit down, stand up, dance, talk, yell, complain, look, watch TV, turn the TV on, turn the TV off, cry, laugh, ha ha. You can do upwards of 1,000 different commands without even leaving your seat.
It's like osmosis. So reading is fantastic. The other great thing about reading is that you can so tailor it to the student's interests. It's one of the first things that I recommend to students right from the beginning. If you can start reading little things in Spanish, particularly things that you're passionate about anyways. If you love baseball and you've just watched a game and you already know what the results are, now go online to a Spanish language newspaper and read a little bit about the game in Spanish. You won't understand most of the words, that's okay. You already know what the results were, so you start getting comfortable. You have this whole context behind it.
What reading does is it puts everything together. In fact, it takes all that grammar that you've been wondering about, thinking about, and what it does is little by little, it just puts it all together. It's almost like you have this puzzle and it just makes the pieces in the puzzles just really smooth. It smooths out the pieces in the puzzle so you can put that puzzle together easily. And you're like, oh, okay, I get it. Because remember, a lot of our grammar the grammar I've acquired has come from reading. So reading is hugely important. I+1 simply means input plus 1. Input is everything I know, and then the 1 that means just a little bit extra.
I+1 is input that students already know, is a vocabulary and the grammatical structures that students already possess. And +1 is going slightly beyond that level.
So when you're with your language partner or your language friend, when I talk about I+1, you're gonna need to tell them. You're gonna say, you know what, can you give me some I+1? And they're gonna be like, sure, what's I+1? So I+1 is super simple. And what it means is they're gonna give you vocabulary, but they're just gonna ramp it up a little bit. They're just gonna be giving you a little bit extra than they normally would. For example, this is a camping scene, and this is a trailer, and there's a beach, and these are rocks. And this is a spare tire. They've got a spare tire. Spare tire is very important. You could have a blowout and then the spare tire you need to use. This trailer looks vintage, looks like a vintage trailer. It looks really expensive. I wish I had a trailer like that. So that's an example of I+1. You never just want to jump in and say, trailer, beach, grass, sun, water. No. You want your partner to give you this loving explanation. Again, like you're the baby and he or she is mom or dad.
One of the things, though, that is definitely lacking in the online environments that I looked at is the group interaction. So much of language is not just the words that we're saying to each other. We communicate through our tone, we communicate through our gestures, we communicate through the space that we occupy and the way we occupy it. And when you have a group of students working together in person, there's communication that is facilitated by those other factors.
Ineffective. How's that? And I recommend the work of a guy named John Truscott, Truscott. His articles, a lot of them are available online. Just look at John Truscott. He's a professor of English in Taiwan. Whenever I go there, I like to see what he's doing. He has reviewed the literature on correction more thoroughly than I have. I've done my best, but John has done a better job. Over and over again, it is not effective. You make a mistake, someone corrects you, you're supposed to change your idea of what the rule is. So I could say, j'ai allé, and the person says, no, je suis allé. I say, oh yeah, that's right. The verb to go takes, this auxiliary and not the other one. It's supposed to do that. In reality, it only works when the rule is very, very simple and you've studied it. You've time to think about it and you're focused on form. So it's the same constraints as grammar. And when correction does work and when formal instruction does work, the effect doesn't last very long. It fades away after a few months. Most of the gain is gone.
So every year, students ask me what I think about Rosetta Stone and apps. And when I say apps, I mean Duolingo to be specific. So let me talk about Rosetta Stone first. With Rosetta Stone, I've got some good news and some bad news. And I'm going to start off with the bad news first. The bad news is, first off, Rosetta Stone is super boring. It is so absolutely boring. I cannot use Rosetta Stone for more than 5 minutes because I am so absolutely bored. Rosetta Stone, secondly, Rosetta Stone is missing one thing. Rosetta Stone is missing the people. There are no people. I need people. I need conversation. I need interaction. I need nonverbal communication. I need laughter. I need all of that, and Rosetta Stone has none of that. Rosetta Stone is basically a digital flashcard game where they go, here's a dog, here's a cat, here's two dogs, here's two cats, and you have to guess using the pictures. Now, here's the good news regarding Rosetta Stone. Rosetta Stone is better than nothing. Anything is better than nothing. So if you're taking a 5-hour class, a 5-unit, 5-hour class every week, and you're supplementing that with say 5 hours of Rosetta Stone, it's better than nothing. But compared to actual conversation, actual comprehensible input, it doesn't come close. So now let me talk about Duolingo. A lot of students like to use Duolingo. I have a huge problem with Duolingo. The biggest problem with Duolingo is its memorization. It's 99.9% memorization. All you're doing is memorizing words and phrases, etc. Memorization is not comprehensible input. In fact, you could memorize the entire dictionary. You could memorize the whole Spanish dictionary, French dictionary, Arabic dictionary, etc., and you would still not speak the language. It just doesn't work that way. Something I'm going to be doing brand new this year, which is going to double my comprehensible input during any given week or day, etc. And it's called the mobile phone. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using the recording device on my mobile phone. All phones have some kind of recording device. And what I'm going to be doing, this is the first time I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to be recording all of my sessions, my interactions with my teachers, my friends, my language partners, my trades, etc. And then just during the week, maybe a half hour before I go to bed or an hour a day in my car, I'm gonna listen to those recordings over again. And that is absolute comprehensible input. It doesn't matter that I've heard it before. In fact, it's important that I hear it again. So I'm gonna do that over and over and over again. I'm gonna get at least 2, 3, maybe even 4 extra hours a week by listening to the recordings on my mobile phone. Now, more importantly, I'm going to be recording the children's story sessions, because what I want is I want a whole list of stories. I want 100 different stories, children's stories on my mobile phone that I can listen to anytime. And you know what the greatest thing is? After this year, I'm going to still have these on my phone, and I'm going to use that just to warm up, to keep current, to keep my fluency, whatever my fluency level is. And I'm going to do that over and over and over again. And I'm going to do that for the rest of my life. My plan is I'm going to study abroad. So I'm going to study abroad this summer in Egypt for 3 months. Why? Because I have 3 months off, and Egypt is a wonderful country and it's not that expensive. So my plan is right now for the 9 months, I'm going to get around 500 hours of comprehensible input in 9 months. And then when I go to Egypt, I'm going to get another 500 hours of comprehensible input in 3 months. So here I'm going to do around 10 to 12 hours a week, and then in Egypt I'm going to do around 40 to 50 hours a week easily. Now, what am I going to do in Egypt? Easy. I'm going to do trades. If I live with the family, great. If I don't live with the family, great. But I'm going to be doing a lot of trades. I'm going to be trading English for Arabic, or Spanish for Arabic, or English and Spanish for Arabic, and I guarantee it's going to work. I've done it before. I'm going to use the apps, and in the end, I'm going to meet tons of wonderful people. I'm going to make lifelong relationships with people, and that's pretty much the most important part of acquiring any language. It's the relationships you're going to make, the lifelong friends you're going to make by acquiring their language. Today's my first day. I don't speak any Arabic. You know that, I know that. I know to say hello, salam alek, salam alek. While we're doing our lesson today, you're going to be doing 90% of the talking. And you're going to say yes or no. So you're going to teach me something, and then you're going to say yes or no. You're going to say nam or la. Nam or la. Okay, so today's lesson is going to be on clothing and colors. Just clothing and colors, okay? So I know all 500 words. I don't need to think. Camera, Nagafa, Lambda, Tarabesa, Kursi, Batanea, Kateb, Arbeya, Arbeya Khelwa, Arbeiti, Kutebi, Kelb, Kelbi, Bicicleta, Sarir, Lamba, Genina, Beiti, etc. So I've got the words.
طب انت عندك قطة او كلب؟
أنا عندي كلب، الكلب اسمه فريكلز.
فريكلز.
أنت شفت فريكلز؟
اه شفت.
حلوة
كبير.
فريكلز كلب كبير أكيد. فريكلز كلب كبير.
بالظبط. طب انت بتطبخ هنا صح؟
بتطبخ.
بتطبخ ايه؟
أنا بحب بعمل أكل كتير، حاجات كتير. أنا بحب أكل لحمة، فراخ، سمك، خضار، سلطة، حاجات كتير. ساعات نص ساعات أنا بحب وقت المطعم، ساعات أنا بحب بعمل أكل هنا. أنت كمان؟
انا ساعات باكل في البيت بطبخ، ساعات بروح المطعم.
أكيد أكيد.
هاي زف، ازيك؟
ازيك؟
عامل ايه؟
أنا كويس. أنت كويس؟ كويسة؟
انا كويسة.
أوكي.
كله حلو. انت دلوقتي احنا النهارده اخر مرة مع بعض.
أكيد
بقالنا
أكيد.
200 ساعة.
200 ساعة 200 ساعة. ساعة كتير ها؟ ساعة كتير. أنا عارف.
كتير.
أنا عارف.
انت مسافر يوم الثلاث مصر.
بالظبط هيسافر. أنا
أنت-
نفسي سافر. أنا نفسي سافر.
انت مبسوط انك هتسافر؟
أنا مبسوط قوي علشان أنا نفسي أنت وأنا اتكلمت كتير مع مصر صح؟
عن مصر. ايوه
عن مصر.
انت ايه اكتر حاجة عايز تعملها في مصر؟
مش عارف. أنا عايز أعمل كل حاجة في مصر. أنا هيسافر شوية، هيسافر بشوية. أنا هيسافر بإسكندرية. إسكندرية أكيد. البحر الأحمر. أنا عايز أشوف الأهرامات. الأهرامات. العمارة. في عمارة كتير في القاهرة
في
صح؟
عمارات كتير.
عمارة كتير. عايز أكل كل حاجة.
كل
أنا
الأكل
عايز أكل
مصري؟
كل أكل مصري.
هتاكل ملوخية؟
ملوخية ممكن. سهلة أعمل أصعب في سهل أو صعبة أعمل أصعب.
لا سهلة انك تعمل اصحاب. لو رحت القهوة او رحت مطعم او اي حاجة هتلاقي كل الناس بتتكلم معاك.
اوكي فكرة كويسة. انا اعمل ايه لو ناس عايزين بس تتكلم انجليزي معي؟ بس تتكلم انجليزي انا؟
كلهم عايزين نص وقت عربي نص وقت انجليزي.
بالظبط. انا عايز اقول لو سمحت انا اسف انا مش اتكلم انجليزي. انا مش اتكلم انجليزي. ازيك عامل ايه؟ انا هنا في القاهرة. انا دلوقتي في الفندق رمسيس هيلتون في القاهرة. ورا انا في النيل، نهر نيل حلوة جدا، جميلة حلوة. في القاهرة. انا عايش دلوقتي في القاهرة. انا اتعامل العربي اكيد في القاهرة. انا مش عارف اكتب، مش عارف اقرا، باش اتكلم، باش الكلام مهم. كل يوم انا بتكلم مع كل الناس هنا. مثلا الناس هنا طيبين جدا. كله عايزين ساعدني ده كويس. في دلوقتي في ركب كتير النهارده صح؟
النهارده انا نازل يعني حوالي الساعة 9 كده.
النهارده يوم 4 ويوم خميس.
يوم خميس.
النهارده يوم خميس. بكره جايزه صح؟
لا احنا بنشتغل كل يوم.
بس انت لا بس يوم بكره.
انا بشتغل عادي.
يا بشتغل انت بتشتغل بكره صح؟ بس النهارده يوم جمعه صح؟
بكره جمعه.
بكره يوم جمعه. اوكي كويس. يعني انا بحب جدا اوبر عشان في تكييف السواق طيبين.
بصراحه هايلين بصراحه يعني اوبر.
يا امان في امان كمان صح؟
امان طبعا.
بس انا زعلان دلوقتي. انا زعلان عشان انا فاضل اسبوعين انا هرجع امريكا. انا عايز اقعد هنا. انا مبسوط جدا هنا في حاجات كتير. انا بحب كل حاجات في القاهرة، مثلا الناس، المطاعم، الفخفخينة اتسترا. انا بحب كل حاجة هنا. انا مبسوط جدا هنا عشان في ناس كتير طيبين. انا زعلان جدا. انا عايز اعيط. القاهرة حوشاني. القاهرة حوشاني. الناس حوشاني. الفاكهة حوشاني. الدوشة لا. الدوشة ما حوانيش خالص. الدوشة لا. بس الناس، الاكل، المكان، البيت، العربية كله حوشاني.
أنا اسمي غازي.
اوكي غازي.
أنا اسمي غازي.
اوكي يا لا نعم.
هذه مجلة.
اوكي مجلة. تاني مرة انا كنت بركب العجلة. انت عارفة انا جبت العجلة في مصر. عجلة بتاعتي. يا انا مجنون. انا كنت بركب العجلة في الشارع اسمه رمسيس. رمسيس الشارع اكبر.
زحمة.
انت عارفة ليه؟ ممكن في الافلام صح؟
في الافلام.
واو. بس كان زحمة قوي زي كل يوم. على طول زحمة. بس انت كنت مرحبا. السلام عليكم. I just want to take a minute and I want to thank you. I want to thank you for sharing in this experience. I want to thank you for sharing in my experience of acquiring another language. And what I want you to do is I want you to go away with two things right now. Number one is this. You know, when I speak another language, whether it's English, Spanish, Italian, French, Vietnamese, Chinese, or Arabic, I don't think when I speak. In fact, I don't want to think when I speak. I just want to speak naturally without thinking. And you know, a lot of people, they tell me, oh, you are so smart. That's how you're able to acquire so many languages. And you know what? Actually, the opposite is true. I'm not that smart. I'm just a normal person. Now, if I was super smart, like a genius, you know, I would learn the language. I could learn languages, but because I'm not a genius and I'm not that smart, I have to acquire the languages. Because again, I don't want to think when I speak. I just want to speak naturally. And number two, I want you to know that you can acquire any language, the language of your choice, in 1 year. If I can do it, anybody can do it. So again, I just want to say adios, hasta luego, buona fortuna, bon chance, forza Said, salam alaikum, and Zaijen. Forza Said, adios.